Welcome back to another episode of Shady Talks. This is number 3. Today I am just here by myself, and we've got another great slate to talk about today. We're going to talk about Louisiana Tech officially joining the Sun Belt, Indiana's cowardly scheduling. I do not have another word to describe it, so I will call it cowardly because that's what Indiana is. They are a bunch of cowards with their scheduling. We're going to look at Teddy Bridgewater, the coach of Miami Northwestern, and his recent suspension, which is idiotic. We'll touch more on that later. And finally, we're going to look at the coach in each conference that is most likely to be fired after 2025. Let's get it. So, first thing to talk about is Louisiana Tech. They are officially a Sun Belt team as of yesterday. Look, this is a great move for both conference and team. I think that Texas State had proven to be a very good football member. I don't think Texas State was always a long-term fit. Looking at where the Sun Belt was a couple of years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago now, they were more Western focused. They were much more spread out. The new geographic area for the Sun Belt, more in that Southeast. They're moving a little bit north to the Mid-Atlantic as well, but you don't want to have a team as far west as Texas. And yes, you are losing a good football program. The Sun Belt has a lot of good football programs as it is. They are going to survive without Texas State. And what they do add is rivalries. So map of this is what the new Sun Belt Conference is going to look like. It is, again, a lot of teams in that Southeast and that Mid-Atlantic region. And you don't see this type of regionality from really anybody else nowadays, which is disappointing. The MAC was the best at this. Now they have UMass in there. They're going to lose NIU. So they're moving around. SEC is still pretty good, probably a similar footprint geographically, but you have teams all the way up in Oklahoma now. We have teams to South Carolina. So they're doing something that no other conference is doing. Well, pretty much everybody else is trying to expand. They're trying to get as many media markets as possible. Sun Belt's just trying to stay compact, get a lot of teams that are close to each other, get a lot of rivalries. I mean, look how close Louisiana Tech and ULM are. Those teams are about 30 minutes away. It's only about 3 hours for Louisiana Tech to get to Louisiana. Arkansas State isn't a horrible drive either. And that is much different than where Louisiana Tech was with the Sun Belt or with Conference USA, excuse me. And you have teams stretching from New Mexico to Delaware. You have a conference that is just adding in new FCS teams when other teams like Louisiana Tech, like UTEP, like a couple other teams that left for the Sun Belt before in Southern Miss and Marshall and Old Dominion, whenever those teams leave, they're just getting backfilled by FCS teams, which has worked out. Sam Houston State looks like they're going to be a pretty good member there, but it's not a sustainable long-term plan, I think. You're going to run out of FCS teams eventually that are good enough to make that jump. And with the greater cost to move up from the FCS to the FBS, you're going to have more teams or fewer teams, that are even going to want to make that jump. But that's besides the point. So one of the big things with this move, Louisiana Tech is joining in 2027. The hope, though, is that they can move that down to 2026. That's when Texas State is leaving. You want to have as much continuity as possible. You don't want to have 1 year with only 13 teams in the conference. That is, again, especially bad for this Sun Belt Conference that uses divisions. Seven teams on one side, 6 on the other is not something you want to have. Another thing that I find somewhat surprising looking at a lot of discourse with Sun Belt fans, especially ones in the East Division, it was a unanimous decision. I mean, your ordinary fans, this isn't the All-Star game. You don't have a fan vote to decide who's in what conference, but the administrators all agreed that Louisiana Tech was the team they wanted. It was the first team that was mentioned, and they acted swiftly. They got what they need to get done. So, yeah, I'm going to touch on that a little more. Some fans were pretty upset given Louisiana Tech has not been the best program as of late. They haven't had a winning season since 2019. Sonny Cumbie hasn't been great. He made a bowl game last year. They lost to Army in the Independence Bowl, but that wasn't because Louisiana Tech had a great year or anything. They were 5-7, but they were graduating more players than other 5-7 teams. They got into a bowl game because of APR, and I guess it'll help to have the extra practices going into 2025, but he needs to win. And another reason for that is he's going to have a competition upgrade. He's not playing CUSA anymore. He's going to a more competitive conference in Sun Belt. He's going to have to win. Louisiana Tech has to win as well, I think, to shut a lot of fans up who think that it's a poor decision. And at the end of the day, winning solves all problems. If the Sun Belt can get a team that can get better than where they are right now, that, again, has those rivalries, has a larger history than a lot of teams in the Sun Belt. They've been playing football at the FBS level for a very long time, especially compare that to James Madison, App State, Coastal Carolina. They are in a pretty good spot in that regard. Again, I think this is a good move for the Sun Belt. I think it's fantastic for Louisiana Tech getting out of the whatever the current Conference USA is, and I think it'll benefit Louisiana Tech's program very soon. Next thing on the docket is Indiana football. We used to never talk about Indiana, and if we did, it was either because they were losing by 50 points, they surprisingly upset somebody, nothing that showed that they were a good program. But now we have problems with what Indiana's doing. Let's talk about it. So their scheduling is very poor, in my opinion. So they canceled their games in 2027 and 2028 with Virginia. They are replacing them with known juggernauts Kennesaw State in 2027 and FCS Austin Peay in 2028. Indiana did something very similar prior to the 2024 season. They had a home and home scheduled with Louisville. That home and home was canceled. And instead of playing Louisville, a actual pretty good Power 4 team, Indiana's non-conference schedule was Florida International, Western Illinois, and Charlotte, a really bad FCS team and two pretty bad Group of 5 teams. And if you look at Indiana's future non-conference schedules, this year they're playing Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. Again, that's a pretty bad FCS school. Those are two mediocre to bad Group of 5 teams. It's not even like they're playing North Dakota State or they're playing James Madison. They're playing close to the bottom of the barrel. And you can maybe write that off as a pass for 1 year or maybe 2 years, but Indiana is getting rid of any game against a power conference team. Something to note for the future in 2030, which is still 5 years away. We don't know what college football is going to look like. We don't know if Kurt Cignetti is going to be there. We don't know if Marcus Freeman's going to be at Notre Dame. It's 5 years out. That's so long to look at. But by that point, Notre Dame is set to start a home and home with Indiana. So we'll see if that game actually happens. It is still on the schedule. Indiana has not gotten rid of it, at least just yet. But if you look at a program like Indiana, when I see Indiana, I want them to win. Indiana never had a 10-win season in program history before last year. I want to see bad teams, historically bad teams, do good things. I want to see more parity in college football. I think parity is awesome to have. The problem is with Indiana, they're becoming unlikable, in my opinion, and they're trying to game the system. What they want to do is make every year look like 2024. They want to use the transfer portal, hit on a bunch of players there, which I don't really have a problem with. If it works, it works. But as we saw with Florida State, you can have some really good years. You can have some really bad years if you misevaluate talent and don't have enough depth behind that. That is besides the point. That's not my big problem here. Indiana wants to beat a bunch of bad teams. They want to get a bunch of wins, and they want to say, oh, we have this many wins and we play in the Big Ten. That makes us a playoff team. And that is not, I don't think that's going to work long term for a couple of reasons. One, if we take a look at Indiana's schedule this year, in the Big Ten, yes, they're playing 3 cupcakes in their non-conference. In the Big Ten, they've got to play Illinois, they've got to play Oregon, they've got to play Penn State. They've got to play at Penn State and at Oregon as well. Those are 2 very tough games. 3 tough games too. I'm not going to disrespect Illinois and Brett Bielema over here. Indiana didn't beat a single ranked team last year. They only played 2 of them. Yes, they were Ohio State and Notre Dame. They played in the national championship. But for the most part, Indiana looked uncompetitive in those games. They looked like they didn't even belong on the same field. But we didn't have any other frames of reference for Indiana other than they blew out a bunch of bad to mediocre teams. So we thought that they were good enough to make the playoffs, and they were a deserved playoff team, in my opinion. I'm not going to change that opinion, but now looking at Indiana in the future, if they do, again, 2025, they're playing three really bad teams in the non-conference. We're not going to know how good the Big Ten is relative to other conferences by Indiana. We're not going to know how good they are in their non-conference either. So they could definitely get inflated in their ranking. And if nothing else, let's just say Indiana's 8-4, but they were a top 25 win for Illinois, who they play each other early in the season. We look at, we could look at this year's at 2025 as well. Let's say Illinois isn't that good. They could definitely be a 7-5 team. They fall back down to earth, and Illinois and Indiana loses to Oregon and Penn State. They beat everybody else. They're a 10-2 team. Let's say one of the games against Oregon is somewhat competitive. They lose by 14 points. They get blown out by Penn State. There's a real chance that Indiana at 10-2, with their best win being against a 7-5 Illinois team who might have been ranked 24th at the time, but finished the season unranked, obviously, because they're 7-5, makes the college football playoff because they're a 10-win team in the Big Ten. They look competitive. They look good against bad teams. They even look decent enough against a really good team. And that's enough to make the playoff because of the Big Ten brand and how strong it is. And that's not what the playoff should be. We don't want to have undeserving teams make the playoffs because they're gaming the system and they're doing this and this. It's not what Jesus. That is still up there. That is not what the playoff was meant to be. Other than the 5 auto bids, there's 7 at-large spots for the 7 best teams in college football. We want to have the best teams possible in the playoffs. We don't want to have a team like Indiana make it because they beat up on a bunch of decent teams and they lost all the good teams they played. That's an argument that we heard so much in the BCS era, why teams like Boise State and TCU, who were undefeated, weren't allowed to play in the national championship because, they didn't beat anybody. Yeah, they're 12-0, but they just beat up on a bunch of bad teams. It's an argument we hear in pretty much any sport-related debate. Oh, yeah, Michael Jordan's not the GOAT. He played against a bunch of plumbers. It's an argument we don't want to see, and we don't want to see that argument from a Big Ten team. They are in a top 2 conference. They shouldn't be playing this poor of a schedule this consistently. And I know people are going to say, oh yeah, the Big Ten is just so difficult and they play 9 conference games. The SEC only plays 8. The ACC only plays 8. That should be enough. But no, I don't think that is. I think that Indiana can get by doing a strategy like that. It's a strategy that hurts the fans because we have worse non-conference games to watch. There's nothing worse than looking at your TV and seeing, half the ACC and half the SEC, they're all playing FCS and Group of 5 nobodies with only 3 good games on the first Saturday of the season. I hate seeing that. And we're going to see in the 2026 and 2027 openers 2 more games, likely 2 more games, at least 1 more of a power conference team playing nobody. It's not entertaining. It's not good for the system. What's worse is I don't want to see other teams start adopting this practice. We could see somebody, probably most likely a Big 12 team, just going off of their schedule, maybe even an SEC team, although we see it with them sometimes, not as often. Usually at worst, every 2 or 3 years, an SEC team will play another power conference team in their non-conference. But yeah, we could see more teams just cancel their notable non-conference games, play Temple, UMass, and I don't know, Maine in their non-conference, and then go 8-1 in their conference games, be 11-1. That's good enough to make the playoffs. They get absolutely destroyed when they're in the playoffs because they have 2 weeks of a really good team scheming to stop them. and they get a pretty big paycheck for making the playoffs, they can hold their heads on having a very good season, but maybe they can even try to develop from it in the long term. They can sell that, hey, we're a playoff team to recruits and have an upturn in that, but it's not, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. They don't deserve to have all of that. And worse off, it's harming the sport. I don't want teams to adopt the Indiana cowardly schedule practice. It's not good. Next thing we're going to talk about is Teddy Bridgewater. After I get some water real quick. Not sponsored by anybody. For those of you who don't know, Teddy Bridgewater, he's a former NFL quarterback, former quarterback at Louisville. He is the head coach at Miami Northwestern High School in Miami, Florida. It is a powerhouse conference, this powerhouse school. They constantly put guys in D1. They have 5 stars and 4 stars pretty close to every year. Saw something from Max Preps today. They are the 11th best team in 2025 and in their preseason top 25 rankings. I should mention that. And their coach, Teddy Bridgewater, is trying to do things to help out his team. I'm going to put a tweet on screen from Robert Griffin III. He is, again, he's a high school head coach at Miami Northwestern, and he has been suspended because he is helping out his program by providing Uber rides, meals, and recovery services for players out of his own pockets. He is trying to better his players. He is trying to give them the opportunities they need to be recruited to a D1 school, win games for Miami Northwestern, just trying to help out a bunch of young men. He is, as far as we know, has done nothing wrong. He's not trying to steal from the school. In fact, the reason that he started to get caught for this, I believe, is last week he posted a message on Facebook asking for donations, asking for some help to try and, get some of this stuff covered because he doesn't want to pay for that all himself. It is a lot of money that he's putting towards these young men, but having some help would be greatly appreciated. He's not playing anymore either. And he's actually not even, he's not collecting a paycheck from Miami Northwestern. He is doing this all as a volunteer. And it's just horrible seeing, again, a guy who is trying to help out a bunch of 16, 17-year-old high school kids to be the best they can be, trying to keep them involved in football, something that is great for them. It is better than whatever the alternative might be. And he is being punished for it. That is not what we need for a guy like Robert Griffin III or anybody else. It's not justice. Like Robert Griffin III said, it's punishing love, leadership, and sacrifice from Robert Griffin III. He's hit the nail with a hammer. It is horrible. He should not be getting punished for all this. I'm going to remove that back to my face. Last thing we're going to talk about today, the most likely coach in each conference to be fired after 2025. Starting with the ACC, I'm going to go with Justin Wilcox at Cal. He's been at Cal since 2017. I know that he is a former player there, and Cal doesn't really prioritize football compared to their academics, but I know they're seeing how empty their stadium is, and the fans know that they need some new blood. He hasn't had a winning season since 2019, and Wilcox has had some glimpses. He made bowl games the last 2 seasons, but went 6-6 and lost. But I just think that there's not enough good going around with Cal. They lost a lot of players in the transfer portal. I don't think they can overcome that, and I think Justin Wilcox will be out of a job after the season. Next up, Trent Dilfer at UAB. Look, he's been horrible in his 2 years at UAB. There's no sugarcoating this. He has been 7-17, and this is despite taking over a program that had winning seasons in all 6 seasons before reviving the program, before Dilfer was hired. Since 2017 through 2023 is the time period that I'm talking about. And it's not like UAB is just maybe a step away, a bounce of the ball in this game, and they could have, maybe been better, made a bowl game. They got blown out in a lot of their games. They got blown out, I think it was 71-20 against Tulane, and Now, Tulane is a very good team, especially for the American standards, but 50 points, come on, man. That is embarrassing. It's disgraceful. UAB was in a very solid spot with Bill Clark. I understand that he had to retire due to medical reasons, but even in the season without him, Brian Vincent, who is now the head coach at ULM, and he was only there for 1 year, but he did some good things at a place that's hard to win at. He won 7 games as an interim coach. Trent Dilfer's only won 7 games in 2 years. He has been awful. I don't think that he is going to figure things out this year. And the Trent Dilfer hiring is going to go down as being one of the worst in recent college football history, I think. Next up is Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. And Fickell, the best way to describe his first 2 years is he tried reinventing the wheel, tried bringing the air raid in the 3-3-5 to Wisconsin, and their defense wasn't bad for the most part, but the offense just completely missed the mark. After losing Tyler Van Dyke due to injury, they were especially horrible, and Wisconsin went from a 5-2 start where it looked like Luke Fickell had figured some things out. They went from 5-2 to missing a bowl game. They had some ugly performances on the second half of that year. They got absolutely blown out against Iowa. They lost to Minnesota pretty ugly as well. They probably could have upset Oregon, maybe Penn State too, if they had good quarterback play, which they didn't have. And it ended up with Luke Fickell losing a lot of players in the transfer portal. He had to fire his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, which was the right decision. He lost his high 4-star Marbury Medier, excuse me for butchering his name, to the transfer portal too, who was, I thought, going to be a very good quarterback for them. They're not at square one, but they're probably at square two. With that being said, I think that Wisconsin is going to be better. They have Jeff Grimes as their offensive coordinator now, who is going to go to more of a power spread approach. They're not going to be running out of the I formation every single play, but the principles of Wisconsin's success in the past, a physical running game, is going to be in place. And to be honest, I don't think that anybody in the Big Ten is going to be fired. I think Fickell will get to a bowl game, maybe at 6-6. And with that really difficult schedule they have this year, that is enough to stick around. Maybe Maryland's Mike Locksley has a chance of being fired too, but Fickell is the most likely to get the axe, in my opinion. Next up, the Big 12 and Cincinnati's head coach, Scott Satterfield. Look, he's been pretty bad in his first 2 years. He, like Luke Fickell, Jesus, had a really bad collapse last year. He can't win close games. They were 1-4 in one possession games in 2024. They had a very ugly choke against against Pittsburgh. They should have been better than what the record suggested. And Scott Satterfield does not have the approval of the fan base. They never really liked him. I mean, Louisville had Scott Satterfield before. They were pretty happy to see that Satterfield left to go to Cincinnati because he was probably going to get fired the year after if he stayed there. And we can see how much better Mr. Jeff Brom has been with Louisville than Scott Satterfield. So I do think Cincinnati has some good momentum. Brennan Sorsby's a pretty good quarterback, transferred from Indiana, and they should be better, but I don't trust Satterfield enough to win there and keep his job another year. Conference USA is next. We talked about this team earlier with the Sun Belt as well. Sonny Cumbie and Louisiana Tech, he is the biggest man on the hot seat. Part of it is just looking at the other coaches in Conference USA. 9 out of 12 of the coaches in the conference have been hired since 2023. Another one is Missouri State and Matt Beard. He was hired in 2022, but again, that's a program in transition. They probably aren't going to fire their coach. Kennesaw State did. I think that was a horrible decision. So just looking at the circumstances involved, Cumbie, he has not had a winning season. Louisiana Tech's going to have to step things up somewhat soon if they're going to the Sun Belt and they want to be competitive there. I don't think that he will get fired, to be honest. I think that the question is, can you make a bowl game this year? I think Louisiana Tech will. They are better than a lot of teams in that conference. and I think he will survive. But just looking at everybody else, he's probably the most likely to be fired. The Mac is next. The Mac is somewhat similar in a way that there's been a lot of recent hires. In the Mac, there's some more really good coaches that have been there for a while. Jason Candle, Thomas Hammock are two examples of that, and they're probably just not going to get fired. But if I look at Joe Moorhead, yes, he was pretty decent at Mississippi State. He is a very good offensive mind, and I honestly think that he's better suited to be an offensive coordinator for a very long time than be a head coach, especially at Akron. He is only 8-28 in 3 years there. That is simply not good enough. I know that this is Akron. It's a tough place to win at, even for max standards. But 3 or 4 years after not winning a bowl game, not making a bowl game, or winning more than 4 games, I don't think that they're going to make a bowl game. And I don't even know if they get to 5 wins. Moorhead's going to get the axe. Mountain West is next. I do hate to say this, but I think Timmy Chang is the most likely to be fired up at Hawaii. There's a lot of new coaches in the Mountain West, so again, that puts more pressure on Timmy Chang, a guy who has been there for 3 years already, entering year number 4, but has failed to make a bowl game. They have had 2 5-win seasons, so that is something, but I just haven't seen a lot of consistency in his Hawaii teams. I've seen a lack of discipline. I've seen his run and shoot offense not be as effective as other run and shoot coaches have been. The good thing for Hawaii this year, they are rolling. They're going pretty much all in on freshman Micah Alagido. He was fantastic in his only start against not Hawaii, against New Mexico to end the season, and he's a guy that if he can turn into a really good quarterback. Hawaii has had some great receivers for a couple of years now. I don't think Braden Shager, their quarterback, was bad, but if Elijah can just be that guy, I think he can keep Chang in town, and I think he will do that, honestly. So I don't think anybody in the Mountain West will be fired. If it were to be somebody, you put a gun to my head saying who is going to get fired in the Mountain West this year, I do have to say Timmy Chang, though. Next up is the SEC, and I'm going to go Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Look, right now, Brent Venables is probably on more of a hot seat, but I like John Mateer. I like Ben Arbuckle, the new offensive coordinator, enough to keep Venables in town. I can't really say the same for Jackson Arnold, the quarterback who lost his job at Oklahoma. Look, Auburn's talented. I just don't know if they can take that next step, though, and keep Hugh Freeze around for another year. They've been doing very good on the recruiting trail. We have not seen that this year. I want to say that Hugh Freeze's class is currently ranked 89th, and there's been talk about him golfing too much, and that it's hurting his recruiting because of it. Somebody asked him that question at SEC Media Days, too. There's just not a lot of positivity going around this Auburn program. I don't know if they can get to 6 wins, and if they can't for another year, Hugh Freeze is going to be gone. It's been a hiring full of lowlights. That loss to New Mexico State is fresh in pretty much everybody's mind, even though Diego Pavia is so good. That's an ugly loss to a team that Auburn has no business losing to. They have not been very good for a while now, and 3 years of no bowl is enough to get any coach in the SEC fired, except for maybe Vanderbilt. Auburn's no exception, though. Final coach to talk about is Ricky Rain at Old Dominion. So in 40 years of playing, technically he started in 2020, but Old Dominion didn't play any games there. Rain has made 2 bowl games, but has yet to achieve a winning season with the Monarchs. He has something to be excited about in Colton Joseph at quarterback for 2025. We saw some flashes of him being a really good quarterback for the Sun Belt team. The question is that enough to get to a bowl and keep his job? I think he's going to need to make a bowl game. He might even need to get to 7 wins, given how they haven't been horrendous. They haven't had any 1-win seasons or 2-win seasons, but it's been around that 4-win mark, 6-win mark at the high end. I think that Ricky Rain needs to do something more for Old Dominion to keep his job. Will he do it? I am not quite sure. I don't love a lot of other coaches in the Sun Belt to be getting fired. It just seems like there's a lot of them that are on the new side. Del McGee, Dowell Loggins are all coaches that are very recently there. You have guys like Clay Helton who have been pretty good. Bob Chesney's shown to be a very good coach in his first year at James Madison. That puts more pressure on Ricky Rain, and it makes his job, his upcoming season, a lot more important. So that is all that we have today for another episode of Shady Talks. Thank you so much if you are still here, and I want to wish you all a very good day. Have a good one.